Data from the American College of Sports Medicine indicates that 35% of elite athletes struggle with either depression, anxiety, eating disorders, or burnout. However, let's flip the script and tell you the good news. Conversations about mental health and wellness in sports have become more commonplace. Building a sense of social capital and being vulnerable in order to grow has become a more accepted practice in sports today, and more professional sports teams are implementing and investing in the mental skills and performance of their athletes. With today's pressure to perform from every corner of the sports landscape for athletes, it's important for them to build their own tribe of professionals and camaraderie with their confidants in order to flourish under pressure and succeed to find their version of athletic prosperity and growth. One person who knows all about the mental side of baseball is Colton Olson. He's the mental skills coordinator for the Colorado Rockies. In his role, he's primarily responsible for providing evidence-based guidance, which is essential to the organizational goals, the development of skills and achievements, and making sure the athletes who take the field for the Rockies are placed in a position to succeed both on and off the baseball diamond. Olson has been around athletics his entire life. For the first 10 years or so of his life, his dad was a football coach and he played baseball himself. So he has a well-rounded perspective on what these athletes need to perform mentally and physically at their highest level. I thoroughly enjoyed having a wide-ranging conversation with Olson about the mental skill side of baseball, developing leadership, and an organizational structure where everyone has a chance to win. Olson provided some helpful and insightful tips on how to build an organization and a mindset of prosperous winning. My friends, it was a great conversation which will add value to you if you work in or outside of athletics. There's something in this conversation for everyone. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to be with you to chat about the exciting work that you do to help the Rockies with their mental skills development. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for a few minutes.
Yes, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Colton, I know that you're responsible for providing evidence-based research and results to help formulate the mental skills development of everything that goes on with the Colorado Rockies. So I'm wondering if you can sort of give me a 360 retrospective of the great job you have and what makes you so passionate about it, my friend.
Yeah, so you used the right words, evidence-based. It's a huge deal for us. So our job, so with the Rockies, I am one of three people that works on mental skills development with the players from the time they get drafted all the way when they go to the big league. So we get a lot of these guys when they're, some of the international players are 16, 17 years old and all the way up to guys in their 30s that have been playing a long time. So our job specifically is we want to help people learn to think in a high quality way, develop a mindset that allows them to be successful and to control their behaviors and eventually become successful professional baseball players. So we spend a lot of time digging into the research, like you said, looking at these evidence-based practices, figuring out how we can get these guys in the space they need to be from a mental perspective to perform well. So that involves a lot of one-on-one sessions with these players. We spend time meeting at the complex. We're always in the dugout during games, so we can talk to guys as they come off the field, right before they go on, during their work in pregame in the clubhouse, things like that. We're really accessible. We do a lot of classroom sessions as well. We'll get the guys together, especially during spring training or other camps, and teach broader topics and then help them implement that right away on the field, which I love. We also spend time working with staff too, helping them integrate mental skills into what they teach as far as hitting specifics, pitching specifics, defense specifics, all that stuff. So we want to help these guys think clearly, perform well, develop a mentality that's going to help them be successful, and pursue greatness the right way, help them develop into great athletes, great young men, and become the people they want to be. So that's the overview of what I do as a mental skills coordinator with the Rockies.
Absolutely. And tell me, my friend, how do you think innovation and sort of leadership are two interconnected? And how do you think they're separated? So how do you think they're linked, and how do you think they stand on their own?
So I think innovation is a really important thing. It's kind of a buzzword these days, and oftentimes it gets associated with technology. We hear a lot about innovative technology, things like that. So on its own, I think innovation is something that moves society and professions forward. I heard a great definition of innovation once. I was listening to a podcast, and the lady said that creativity is something that's new to you, and innovation is something that's new to the world. So being innovative is presenting new perspectives, new ideas, new technologies, anything to the world. So it's really important on its own. And I really think they go hand in hand, because to be an effective leader, I think you need to be able to see things from a perspective that other people can't. You need to be able to look places other people haven't in order to move your company, your organization, your field forward. And I think it's about having a broad scope with that as a leader. To really be effectively innovative, you've got to look at not only being innovative from a technological perspective, but how are you interacting with people? How are you building relationships? How are you holding people accountable? How are you developing culture in your organization? And I think because you can be innovative in all those areas. So I think to be an effective leader, you have to be looking to bring new things to the table as often as possible in the name of progress. So that's where it stands for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think are the keys, Colton, to really developing consistent individual and organizational growth, in your opinion?
So that's a big thing for us. We're all about individual and organizational success for us, and it goes hand in hand. I think when we develop individuals the right way from a player perspective, staff perspective, that creates organizational success for us. So really we focus on developing people the right way, building effective relationships. And I think common goals are massive. Something that a lot of organizations lack, you see it in professional sports a lot, is that the organizations are big and you have a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, and they fail to see things the same way sometimes, because humans are inherently flawed. And I think sometimes they have a tough time sharing interests or getting away from their own personal interests. So I think having a common goal and a common vision for things is massive. And then being able to effectively communicate that goal and help people see it in a way that they can digest and then act upon it is massive. Because if you can't get everyone to understand the goal and get everyone to work in the same direction towards that common goal, your success is going to be spread out. And for us, we see, baseball can be a individualized game that everybody has their own personal stats, and their personal stats matter. But at the end of the day, we want to build a great team that can come out and win a lot of games and eventually a championship as a team. So understanding that common vision and learning how to work towards it together is massive. So that's what I would say are some of the keys, at least for us, in building organizational success.
Yeah, and you've referenced this a couple of times, so I'll just circle back to this, Colton. Tell me, how do you think you can build sort of successful and authentic relationships with players and the organization as well?
Yeah, so authentic relationships and trust are probably the most important pieces of my job, especially because what I do is intimate work. I'm spending a lot of time in intimate environments, closely with people, talking about different aspects of their life, their values, what they do, who they want to become. So in order to do that effectively for me and to have the relationship work the way it needs to, because it's a two-way street, I have to get something from them and then they have to get something from me in turn. And that's a cycle. So I think building relationships is massive. And for me, the most effective way to do that I found is, and this is with anybody, not just players, but is really being transparent and being authentic in who I am. When working with these guys, I played baseball myself in college, not really at a super high level, but I had a lot of experiences that these guys also have. And same with general life experiences. And I found that when I'm transparent about my experiences and how I felt, talking to them about my struggles, the mistakes I made, things like that, and how I worked through them, that really strengthens relationships, and it creates a nice common ground where nobody's hiding anything. So that real authentic trust, authentic relationship that's based on transparency is massive for me. And we value that in the organization as well. I think staff are very transparent with one another. No one's holding anything back, and it's all in the name of making each other better. So that's a big deal for me. Building relationships is massive, and being authentic, transparent has been the most important thing for me in building successful relationships with the guys I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Colton, in today's society, athletes are sort of targeted or asked to wear many hats from a mental perspective, and the mental pressure to perform and balance their own personal life with social media, their family expectations. It can really become cumbersome if you don't know how to manage it. So I'm fascinated to ask you about how you help players sort of manage the mental skills of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to me, there's two parts to that question. So the expectations piece is massive. And nowadays, what we see especially is that really high and often unrealistic expectations are being pushed on younger and younger athletes. I see kids that are 9, 10 years old that are expected to perform at a super high level, expected to make certain teams, to be a certain type of athlete. And that's a really hard place to put a young child. Even when kids are into high school, the expectations now are really high. And I think you have a lot of parents, social media, like you said, is massive in trying to get these kids to perform at a certain level. And the issue with that is it's all based on outcomes, right? So the way I help people manage their expectations when they get to us, these are players who have been elite in their sport for a long time. And they often have high expectations. Some of these guys are drafted really high and they're paid a lot of money. And when that happens, people expect them to perform well. So expectations don't necessarily go away, but one of the ways that I help people manage expectations is changing their view of them from outcomes to things that are all the way in their control. So more process-oriented or mastery-oriented thinking, right? So oftentimes you hear people like young athletes are told that they need to have a certain batting average or a certain ERA, or they need to strike this many people out. And those expectations are unfair because you're not totally in control of all of that. I think, if you tell someone they need to get a certain amount of hits, that's not fair because sometimes they're going to do everything right and someone's going to make a good play and they're going to be out. So they can't get on base. That's not all the way in their control. So we have them focus on things like their effort, their attitude, their process before the game, during the game, after the game, the way they handle their emotions, what their intentions are when they go out there. And they always have things to focus on from a more technical perspective that they get from their coaches. But we focus on shifting the expectations from outcomes like hits, strikeouts, ERA to things that are all the way in their control, if that makes sense. And then the other part of your question with social media and life skills and life expectation is, we communicate to these players from the start that the things that they learn in the Colorado Rockies organization with us are things that are going to be applicable for the rest of their lives. All these guys are going to go on to do something besides baseball eventually. And the skills that they learn, if they take them seriously and take them along with them out into the professional world, can make them great professionals in whatever they do. And keeping the same mentality about expectations, mindset, awareness of who they are, those are all really valuable in the professional world as well. So that's what I got on expectations. Does that answer your question?
It certainly does. And I'll just follow up with this. A lot of times in sports, no matter the sport, we always hear the expression, sometimes we have to protect players from themselves from a physical perspective. So I'm wondering, how do you make sure that players don't overexert themselves from a mental perspective? You kind of answered it in your last answer, but I'll allow you to elaborate or expand if you have any additional thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of these athletes are at a greater risk of overexerting themselves mentally than physically, because mental overexertion is sneaky, and it can be disguised as things. A lot of guys, when they don't perform as well as they want to, they feel like they had a bad game or something like that, they'll go back to their hotel, to their apartment, to wherever they are, and they'll just stay up and think about it and punish themselves, and they'll spin their wheels for hours on end trying to figure out what happened. And this leads to poor sleep. They'll continue thinking about it the next day. They can't do their work the way they need to at the field because they're thinking about previous performances. And then it's a vicious cycle that continues, and then it adds on and adds on. And also, too, what happens is these guys, like we talked about the managing expectations piece, they form unrealistic expectations of themselves, and they end up tying their identity and their self-worth into their performance, which leads to great mental exertion. They think that if they perform poorly in a game, that it means they're not a good person anymore, that if they have a bad season, that they're a bad person, that they're failing in life. And that's not true. We always tell them that failure is an event. It's not a person. So if you fail at a game, you're not a failure. You struggled that day. That's okay. So teaching them the proper techniques for closing, per se, turning the page on to what happened today and moving on to the next one is really important, because the pressure is on, expectations are high from themselves and from others. And if they're not given the proper tools, they'll think way too much and end up in a position of both mental and physical exhaustion, because they don't know how to properly handle difficult situations or think the right way after the game is done. So, and really what we teach them, a powerful tool for that is just journaling. One of the best ways for you to prevent yourself from overexerting from a mental perspective is get a journal. Write things down. If you're racking your brain about a certain problem or a certain event, write it down on a piece of paper. It's going to force you to make it concise. It's going to force you to make it readable. And when you put it on paper, it sort of takes it out of your mind. It releases it from your brain, and it's there, and it allows you to solve the problem if that needs to be solved, or it just allows you to move on. So tools like that are things that we give them on a regular basis to prevent them from getting into that state of mental overexertion.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colton, I'm going to share with you just a little bit about myself. So I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. It simply means that I don't have enough oxygen to walk normally. So I use a wheelchair and a walker to get around. And one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is I wanted to build communities of social capital to allow people to get a range of information so that they don't feel sort of socially isolated. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how important is building social capital for athletes and really providing them a community of people that they trust?
is massive. Social capital is huge in athletics. It's not talked about that often, but professional athletics specifically, it's a very tight-knit world, and it's a smaller world than you think. There are a lot of professional athletes out there, a lot of professional baseball players, but it's a small world. A lot of people are really closely tied together. A lot of people end up playing and then coaching and working in professional baseball for a long time. So social capital is massive, and I think you talking about establishing a community, some common ground for these players is huge. And it's good to make an effort to do that because people come from all walks of life from pro baseball. You get players from all over the world. They've all had different experiences in their personal lives, in their baseball lives, in everything they do. They all have different tastes, different likes, all that stuff. So finding some common ground and building community and teaching them to establish this social capital is huge. And I think the game is getting better at that now. I think as it becomes more mainstream to do so, it's easier for guys to have conversations now that they likely wouldn't have had many years ago in the game. So it's a big thing. And we see guys that invest in that. It really helps their career. There's a chance in a sport like pro baseball, you might get traded and the next day you have to go fly to a state you've never been to in a city that has no restaurants you've ever heard of with a bunch of guys you've never met. So the more broad you can make your network and the more people you can form relationships with, the safer you're going to feel when things like that happen. Even within your own organization, we draft guys and they don't meet all the other people in the organization for like 8 months after they get drafted. So when it comes to spring training, they get promoted to a new team. You have to be able to form relationships, and you have to value that social capital piece you're talking about. So it's a really big part of our game and discussion as the game progresses, and players understand that. So it's really huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colton, tell me, what do you think is the best part of your job, and what do you think people would be surprised to learn about what you do, buddy?
The best part of my job is definitely the relationships I get to form. I love being able to go to the field every day, and I love baseball. I played baseball my whole life. It's something I really enjoy. I love being able to go to the field, be a part of the game, but especially to see the guys working in that element, doing something they love, and then forming relationships with them in the work that we do is fantastic. I think there are a couple aspects of my job that might surprise people, but the first one, which also is one of the things I enjoy most, is people don't realize often how much we have to teach. I think oftentimes our job is perceived as more of a therapist, where people would come into a room or whatever, and then we talk about stuff. So it's not as much like that. I spend a lot of time, like I said, in front of large groups of players teaching concepts. And then when we meet individually, we're still teaching. I'm still teaching them things. So I love the aspect of teaching, and especially the moments where people connect with something that they're being taught, they identify with it, and then they're able to put it to work, and we can see the results of that on the field right away. That's the best part of my job. It's sort of those light bulb moments that people have where something just clicks and they can put it to work, and sometimes it changes their careers. So that's the best part, I think. And some surprising things, like I said, the amount of teaching we do often surprises people. I'm very thankful for that, though. I love to teach. And I think another piece too is the travel. I mean, my job, we travel a lot. Once we get into season, I'm traveling 2 to 3 weeks a month, flying all over the country, traveling to different minor league affiliates, and spending time with their affiliates about a week at a time. So I think the travel surprises people, but other than that, it's a great job. I'm really thankful for what I get to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Colton, I also want to talk to you about resilience. So I'll relate it back to myself for just a second. So, Colton, at 9 years old, a doctor told me in a hospital conference room that I wouldn't be able to walk for the rest of my life. And at that point in my journey in life, I had to make a decision. I didn't know it at the time, but I had to go back to school the next day. And so the principal of my elementary school at the time knew that I was headed to London for my final operation. And when I got back, I was going to be told that I wouldn't be able to walk for the rest of my life. But then she put me into her office, and she had everyone assigned to my file, from teachers to therapists to social workers and educational assistants. And she listened to me do this spiel about how I wouldn't be able to walk and what does that mean for the rest of my life. And so then she looked at me and she said, the only limitations in life are the artificial ones that you place on yourself individually. And, Colton, I really think that was the turning trajectory point in my life. So I'm curious to ask you about resiliency in sports and how much time you spend on talking to players about resiliency.
That's a great story, and I love hearing that. That's really an inspirational story, and I think what you said is so fantastic. The only limits on your life are the artificial ones, are the ones that you put on there, and that's a discussion that we have with guys all the time. Baseball is a really tough sport. It's probably, it is the only sport in the world where at the big league level, if you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. It's a really, really hard game. And when a lot of these guys get to pro baseball, they've had a lot of success up to that point. They're great players. They're the best. They've always been the best on their team, the best in their state, some of them the best in the country. So having that discussion with them that they're going to face adversity. Things are not always going to be easy, right? But they have to understand that what's going to set them apart in their career is their ability to bounce back from those mistakes. And then, like you said, recognize that the only limits are the ones you put on yourself. So many guys have beliefs that are so deeply rooted in them about their abilities, about who they're going to become, about what they do, that they never really let themselves out. They never really let themselves free, and they can't reach their potential because of that. And I think you're a great example of that, right? Just, somebody told you that, and then you realize that the only limits are artificial, and that you have a choice. Really, it's every day. And this is something we preach all the time. It's every play, every day, whatever it is, you have to make these choices to, number one, battle the limits that you're setting for yourself. And then number two, bounce back from the difficulties you face. And realistically, as you get better at that, you should be able to bounce back a little bit faster every time. It's always uncomfortable at first. It always sucks at first. You get hit in the mouth and it's hard the first time, but you get more prepared for that. You get rid of some of those limiting beliefs, and you really hone that ability to bounce back and understand that, something tough happened, but that's it. One of my favorite mantras that we teach guys is, you face something tough, you get beat one time. So what? Now what? That's what you tell yourself. So what? It happened. It's done. I took my lessons from it. Now what do I do? So that's a really important part of baseball, as tough of a game as it is. You got to be resilient. You got to be able to bounce back, and you got to be able to battle those limiting beliefs like you talked about.
Absolutely. And, baseball is the longest of any professional season, as you know. So how do you work with players to make sure that they don't get fatigued from a mental perspective once they go through 162 game season?
It's not easy. It's a really long season. And for us, it's, like we said, the resilience piece is massive in that. This season's going to get long. It's going to be tough. There are going to be times, and, for some of our players, like, you're going to be really tired of playing baseball games in Fresno, California when it's 110 degrees outside. But you have to do it. That's part of the deal. So I think managing expectations from that point, understanding that it's going to be long and that you have to take care of your body, the physical piece of that is massive. If you can keep your physical condition in check, your mental piece will also stay in a better place. But I think being resilient is massive, and also having fun. That's often a part of this game that's really forgotten. As you get older and you play in more competitive settings, you got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy what you do, and you've got to be in pursuit of something. You can't just be trying to get to the end of the season. If you're just trying to make it to game 162, you're going to be hurting about halfway through the season. So enjoy what you do and find things to pursue. Set little goals for yourself. Decide what you're trying to do each day and get something out of it. Understanding that there's work to be done every day and being in pursuit of something all the time makes the season seem a little bit shorter because you're not always looking to the end. It's like, if I'm in pursuit of something every day, all I'm looking at is today. I'm just pursuing right now, and I'm trying to be great at what I do right now. We tell them a lot, be where your feet are. Just be present. Try to master something in the moment and have fun while you do it. So having fun, pursuing mastery, being where your feet are, doing stuff, pursuing goals every day, and then relationships with your team as well. You got to have some camaraderie. You got to have your brothers next to you who can help you get through this, help you battle the tough times, and help you have a little bit of fun as well. So that's a few of the ways we help guys battle the grueling season, because it is long.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to combine my next two questions because they're interconnected. So I'm curious, with your current role with the Rockies, what do you think has been your greatest moment of impact, and what do you view as the future of your industry and profession as mental skills coordinator?
So I don't know. The greatest moment question is a hard one for me. I'm not sure I can pinpoint one. I've had a lot of really good moments, particularly working with players closely from an individual perspective, being with them. And like I said, those moments where, they have that aha moment and the light bulb comes on and they connect with something that we're talking about and then implement it and it changes their career for the better. Those are the moments, man. Those are why I do the job. So I would say I've had a lot of really good moments, and I would hope that my greatest moment is still to come. You'd probably have to ask some of my colleagues what they thought. I don't know if I can decide my own greatest moment, but I'm working every day to get there. So I would say that I've had a lot of really good moments connecting with guys, helping them implement what we do and seeing them change their careers and their lives. But the greatest moment is definitely still to come. And I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. So what do you think is the future of your industry as mental skills coordinators?
So the industry's in a good spot right now. I think it's becoming more and more mainstream. It's talked about a lot more than it was. It's growing at an exponential rate. The organizations around baseball are hiring mental skills professionals at a greater rate than they have in a long time, which is really good to see. Because back in the day, it really wasn't a common field. There was the practitioners were few and far between, not a lot of places to get degrees in this area, and that's really growing. So it's definitely becoming a more popular profession. And I think one of the most important ways it's growing is the stigma that used to be associated with what we do is now going away. So prior to really recent years, I would say up until 5 or 8 years ago, there was really a negative stigma around mental skills professionals in baseball. A lot of people thought that if the mental skills coach or mental skills coordinator was coming to see you or was coming to talk to you or was around the team, that it meant something was wrong. The old adage, they would say, hey, if you're messed up in the head, go see that guy. So that was the old stigma, was they thought if that guy's around, it means that I'm messed up or the team is messed up or somebody's doing something wrong and he's here to fix me. That's changing now, which is fantastic. We don't have hardly any of that in our organization. And we work hard to make sure that people don't have that perception of us. But it's seen now more as a real part of the game. It's a tool, and it's an important piece of the game that separates the good from the great. So that stigma changing and it being more of what I would call an upstream approach to mental skills now, where we're preparing people to face adversity and giving them the tools ahead of time instead of meeting them when they're already struggling and trying to help them. That's a huge piece of this. And I think as that continues to move forward and that stigma continues to change and players become more excited about it, which they are, the field's going to get bigger and bigger and more important throughout baseball and other sports, other areas of the professional world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colton, as I wind down my time with you this afternoon, buddy, I'm curious to know, what's the best part about living in Colorado? And when you're not working, my friend, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, Colorado's a good spot. The best part about living in Colorado is that you kind of get a little bit of everything. So in the winter, it snows a lot. We're close to the mountains. I love skiing. I grew up skiing, so going up to the mountains, being able to ski for a day or two, getting out in the fresh air in the mountain air is fantastic. In the summer, I love to hike. I love to bike. I really like to play golf. There's a lot of really good golf in Colorado. So when I'm not on the road working, I try to come back home and play as much golf as possible. And there's always stuff going on. There's great food. I consider myself a bit of a foodie, so I love good food, lots of options. There's good beer in Colorado, which is great too. So really the best part about this state is that there's something for everybody, and there's never a shortage of things to do. So I love that I can go out and hike and golf in the summer and then enjoy the snow and the skiing in the winter as well. And then obviously there's Coors Field in the spring and summer, so you can go watch some baseball as well at a great baseball stadium. It's an outstanding place to live.
There's nothing wrong with being inclusive for everybody, right?
Not at all.
Hey, yeah, tell me, where does your individual passion for baseball come from personally?
I grew up around baseball. Actually, I was a big sports family. My dad was a college football coach, a head coach for about the first 10 years of my life. So I actually grew up a lot around football and in football locker rooms on the field. So I love football as well, but I always played baseball, from the time I was playing t-ball at, 3 or 4 years old, whatever it was, all the way through college. And now I work in it. It was something that I always loved. I think being out there, and the game was always peaceful to me. I loved being on the field. Everything about it suited my personality. I made great friends playing baseball. And my dad played baseball growing up, so I shared that with him. And so it started off as a family thing. And then as I grew, I had some success in baseball, and I had a lot of great experiences, and I learned a ton playing baseball. I'm really thankful for all my experiences on the baseball diamond. So it's something that's always been near and dear to my heart. But as I've gotten older, I've realized how valuable it's been in my life and how valuable it can be in other people's lives too. So that keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Colton, my final question for you this afternoon has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
I talked a little bit earlier about the importance of building relationships, people, and being transparent and authentic. And I really want to be remembered as somebody who was 100% authentic all the time, was always real with people, and someone that was really a relationship builder. I want to be seen as somebody who prioritized above everything else, building relationships and making people better. I think that's what I want people to think when they think about me, however many years from now. I hope they think that when he was around, I felt like he could help me become a better version of myself. And, I hope that I'm on the journey with them too. That's not that I've got it all figured out. It's not even close, but that's something I'm always pursuing, and I hope I can help other people pursue. So I just want to be somebody that's authentic, that cared about other people's growth, and that hopefully helped other people grow into better versions of themselves, even if it's just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Colton, tell me, if people want to get connected with you personally or the Rockies, what's the best way they can do that?
You definitely hit my LinkedIn. Just search Colton Olson on LinkedIn. You can get me there. On Twitter, my Twitter handle is Colt, COLT_O45, Colt O45. I have a website that's sort of my personal website, and that's raidoperformance.com, RAIDO performance.com. You can go there and shoot me an email. Otherwise, Instagram, Facebook, all those, you can just search my name and I'll be on there. I'm always happy to talk and excited to get to know people. So if anybody wants to, please reach out.
Well, I have to tell you, I was super excited to circle this interview on my calendar and engage in a conversation about this most important issue about the mental side of sports, Colton, because you may not know this, but I originally went to school to become a sports reporter. So this interview was near and dear to my heart. I want to thank you for the good work that you do to positively promote the mental side of baseball and building the skills of our future generation from a mental skills perspective in baseball. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
No, thanks for having me, and I appreciate you showing support and giving me a chance to be on here. It was fun, Kevin. I appreciate it.